And so, welcome everybody to the pretty much monthly all staff call. It's always one of my favorite calls to do. I appreciate the CAs and all of their efforts that they bring. And we couldn't serve all of the patients and grow the practices that we have without the effort of the team around us. And in fact, a lot of times practices grow kind of in spite of the doctor because the team is so strong. And so want to make sure that you guys are connected to my stuff and have access to me. And so first off is all of you should have access to kind of my CA training site. And so there's over 20 hours of training that are these recorded calls that become kind of 24/7 on demand. And so each month as I record it, I update, and so I will replace last year's one-stop front desk with this presentation. But if you do any of these, and I suggest that you do, if you wanted to write a little book report on what you learned and how it applies in your practice and send it both to me and your senior doc, it would be a great kind of bookend piece to doing the lesson. And so making sure that you all have access to that. If somebody needs access to that, you can email me at drleenewman@gmail.com, and I'll make sure that you get connected. Today, I want to talk about a couple of things. I kind of want to start with a fertility talk. And so I think that one of the great opportunities that we have as a profession, and each of us in our own individual practice, is really to be able to look at health challenges in our marketplace. And so infertility is an interesting topic to discuss, because if you would pretty much randomly ask anybody that you would run into, nobody would have a real understanding of why anybody facing this issue should be under active chiropractic care. And so kind of seeing that, and then it's this other opportunity that we have to go into the marketplace. And so whether you ideally want to see, a bunch of pregnant women trying to get pregnant babies, and a pediatric and obstetrical type of practice, or it's just an issue to be aware of, because pretty much every woman that we interact with, that we do a history with, is going to be somewhere on this continuum that I'm going to share in a moment. And so by definition, infertility is defined as not getting pregnant after 1 year of trying. And so think about the stress that could create in a relationship, and all of the emotional challenges that both parties in the couple, the woman and the man, face under that. And so it's estimated that 10% of all women, or 6 million women, kind of fall into this category, right? And so as we have delayed getting pregnant for the first time, the issue has become a little bit more pressing, or the numbers have become bigger. And so the short course is that half of the problems are identified as women problems, 30% are identified as men's problems, 10% are undetermined, and 5% are kind of one-off weird type of cases. Weird's not the right word, but special or unique type of cases. And so, it's this huge problem. 3 million women are facing this as an issue. And so the typical medical treatment, like for any other condition, is to try to create a compound, that a drug that a person or a woman could take, and try to fix what isn't working right in the body. And so these drugs are designed to either start or regulate ovulation, in hopes of restoring ovulation, leading to a higher chance of pregnancy. And so certainly if this is successful, it's a way to go, right? And so there's all of these different drugs, and there's different, amounts that have been prescribed. And as a chiropractor, what I want to always say for any health challenge is to look natural first, and then to do chemical, and then to do surgical. And so in the real world of our practices, my observation is this, is that with a pretty high degree of correlation, when we see damage on x-ray in a female's lower back, in her lumbar spine, it will accompany some type of reproductive history that's significant. Meaning that either her period started late, they're irregular, they're difficult, meaning painful and other types of symptoms, that depending again on the female's age, that getting pregnant and staying pregnant has been difficult, overall difficult pregnancies and deliveries, and then as they age into their 50s and older, a history of hysterectomy. And so seeing this is the continuum, right? So it's something to be thinking about and to check in with on history for every one of our female patients. And so to, again, further understand that it's the whole person in front of us. And I think that one of the healthcare challenges in America in 2019 is that any office that you typically go to, they only look at the one little area that they're specialists in or that they want to look at, and they don't look holistically at the whole person. And so I think that this is super important stuff. All of these symptoms, right? I don't have the numbers, I haven't looked them up, but like it's a significant percentage of our female patients. And so it's important. And then this would be some suggestions, again, for improving your chance to get pregnancy, normalizing how your body works, right? Knowing your cycle, knowing where the fertility window is, right? So 5 or 6 days prior to ovulation, and you can, there's different ways to know when that is. And so you increase your activity in this window to increase your chance of becoming pregnant. You look at the diet and supplements, right? So, and vitamins, both naturally by diet and by supplements. You look at everything that you're putting into the body, right? Including the vices. And so, again, we have all of these public health issues overlapped on the percentage, the 3 million women that are having difficulty getting pregnant. And so if we could just be a voice for natural, and so that we could eliminate these stresses, we could create more normal, like a healthy diet and like plenty of sunshine and activity, right? It can go a long way, right? And so I wouldn't go like necessarily super crazy over diet, but like I would look at and trying, you know, if I asked any of you, you know, what are 3 things that you could do to eat cleaner this week, right? You know, in the chat, somebody type in an answer. What's something that you could do to eat cleaner this week? Do that for me if you could just enter it in the chat. No bread is an answer, right? And so you come up with the list of 10 or 15 things, you know, you can build a natural whole food type diet relatively easy. Less sugar, cut out soda, right? And so if we got somebody that wasn't going to give up an inch on any dietary stuff other than to give up on soda or diet soda, right? That's a tremendous breakthrough and decreased stress in that person's body. It would be a tremendous breakthrough for that person, right? Right? Nothing from the box. That's a good one, right? And so, you know, that's even advanced to go and to get stuff that's grown and natural, right? But all of us kind of understand that, and so being able to preach it becomes easier. Regulate blood sugar, right? This is an issue in reproductive insulin control. It's associated with increased risk of infertility. And so if you're on the borderline, if this is an issue, to make sure to measure and to eat the way that you're supposed to eat and to keep an eye on it, and so that your blood pressure is as healthy as it can be, right? Proper fats as opposed to bad fats, organic, right? Avoiding toxic foods, And so pretty much you can find that anything is going to be bad for you, but you kind of have to pick your fights here. And so again, I like to go with, ideally if it's available and if it's affordable, the closest to natural I like the best. So grass fed beef, wild fish, that type of stuff, I think is more natural. But even getting as high quality as you can get at any market, whether it's availability or price issues, I think can be beneficial, right? On the exercise side, keeping moving. Exercise improves sensitivity to insulin, evens out blood sugars. And so even if all you can really do is walk, imagine basically someone that doesn't, and bringing them to a point where they can walk 2 miles 5 times a week, right? And that would be a healthy workout. And let's say it's even 15-minute miles, so it's 30 minutes. And so it kind of gives an overall holistic kind of walk. And so from there, you could work with anybody to get to whatever the next level that person might want to do. And maybe like doing a 5K could be fun for that person. And so that's just a little bit over 3 miles. And whether it's a walk or a walk run or a slow run or even an outright run, there's an overall health benefit to kind of being focused on that goal. If you wanted to add core training, right? So any type of Pilates or yoga or 5-minute abs or type of stuff, as well as strength exercise, which would be either body weight, TRX bands, or outright weightlifting. All of that could be healthy, again, leading to more normalization of how your body's supposed to function, and in this case, leaning to increased chance of pregnancies, right? Always, hydrate. Try to have as pure water as you can. This is not a recommendation of this filter per se, but if your local water is contaminated, right, you probably want to filter your water. But most patients, right, if we could get them off of sodas, off of diet sodas, and if we could get all of our patients to drink 4 extra cups of water a day, right, that would be a tremendous shift. And there's a lot of benefits from proper hydration. And then of course into our wheelhouse is improved posture. And so this was my sales representative at the men's store. And so he was super tall. I think he was 6'6". And so he ends up carrying himself with this was standing up straight. And so in this conversation, it's about females and it's about their posture, but the relationship, again, this is what I end up seeing when I see a trash lumbar spine. And so these square blocks here are the vertebra in the spine. And this one is actually partially collapsed and is probably a compression fracture. And most times it's not this severe or serious, but the misalignment is similar. So on this spine, there is no curve. This is a picture of a low back taken from the side. The person's facing out this way. And we would expect to see a bigger backward C in the spine, and we're not seeing it. And so it creates a tremendous amount of stress on the nervous system. These nerves in the low back go right to the reproductive parts. And so this is the chiropractic connection. And this is why there's a correlation between trash lumbar spines and all kinds of reproductive health issues, right? And so it's overall the brain-body connection. And so again, the nervous system is being compromised. So overall, there is some percentage of decreased efficiency for that patient and that person's body, right? On top of it, the actual individual circuit, in this case directly to the reproductive organs. And so it highlights that on both levels, both systemically and specifically, right? And so regardless of what any couple is doing around infertility issues, they don't have to change anything else that they're doing medically. If they were both under care, I believe it dramatically increases their chances of being healthier and of conceiving and of having a healthy baby. And so that would be my message around that. Just a couple of shout outs, right? The International Chiropractic Pediatric Association is dedicated to chiropractic and taking care of babies. And Dr. Larry Webster, who was a personal mentor of mine, he ran the clinic that I did my student clinic in at Lucky Street at Life University in downtown Atlanta. He was also 6 months behind my father at Logan. Larry graduated, I believe, in 1960 from Logan. He's also the grandfather of chiropractic pediatrics, and in a weird coincidence, died on my birthday 22 years ago this month. And so always a shout out to Dr. Webster. And so before I move on into One Stop Front Desk, both either by shout outs or by chat, a takeaway, something important, a question, a breakthrough, a thought from what I just went over. Anybody have a comment to shout out? You could unmute yourself. Go ahead, Dr. Fenn. Right, so it's a whole topic that you can use in any way that you promote, right? It could be a whole Facebook campaign, it could be a radio, it could be a flyer, it could be an internet page, right? Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Another takeaway? And I want to meet people where they are and then introduce them to the chiropractic way of life. And so I completely agree with you. So it's great. Someone else have a takeaway or something that's important? Thinking about doing a Facebook video around this. That's a good one. Right? All right. Moving on. Was there someone else that wanted to make a comment? Hi, Ash. I completely agree. And, you know, you can't really drink too much water unless you're in the contest of, like, drink until you don't pee, right? But, like, other than that, you really can't drink too much water, and most of us are dehydrated to some level or another. Very good. All right, moving on to my procedural piece today, right? One stop front desk. And so I talk about this a lot, and I just want to reteach it. And so, like anything else in nature, our practices are only as strong as our weakest link. And so if the doctor is taking 2 hours with a new patient, that might be your weakest link. Or if there are no new patients, that might be your weakest link. If the front desk is overwhelmed, that could be the weakest link. And the one-stop front desk is designed to avoid that, is to support the front desk and to make the front desk a super efficient hub of activity in our office, right? And so I believe that it is a core procedure for high volume practices. You know, your 500 a week practices might not call 200 visits a week high volume, but I'm calling 200 visits a week or more as high volume. And so the issue becomes, if patients routinely stop at the front desk on the way in and on the way out, then 200 visits a week at the front desk becomes 400 visits a week at the front desk. And to some extent, if it was like my office, people would stop like in between, either after getting adjusted before PT or vice versa. And so like maybe 50% or 25% of the people did that. And so 200 visits a week was really like 450 visits a week, right? And so that creates this massive inefficiency. On the other hand, I've seen one super trained, on purpose, efficient, excited front desk CA control 700 visits a week with, it's a full-time job, but it wasn't overwhelming. And so I think that the one-stop front desk is an important element to making that happen, right? And so my belief is that the front desk should have a full-time 40-hour a week or 37.5-hour a week, and the overtime spills out to 40, anchored to the front desk. And in priorities, her priorities are people that come through the front door, then the phone, then the computer. And so if you just had 30 seconds to train somebody sitting at the front desk, that would be my training, right? Service the people that walk in, then the phone, then the computer. And now, of course, there's probably 50 other hours of training that I'd like to do, but that's where I would start, right? And so on each and every visit. And so this becomes a discipline. This starts with the senior doc. This is ingrained throughout the staff and then throughout the patient. So ideally, we greet patient by name. And so I've been seeing a couple of medical providers. I'm going through this PT, 8 visits of PT. And so today was my 7th visit. And for the 7th consecutive time, the same receptionist asked me what my name was, right? And so we want to marry great customer service with great clinical service. And I believe that the one-stop front desk does that because it's highly efficient and it allows us to service each patient even better. So we'd like to greet the patient by name. The patient signs in, right? So I still have a handwritten sign-in sheet. If you have some type of swipe or individual identification, I'm all for that as well. But I'd like to have some way of just proving that the patient was actually in the office, that they participated in acknowledging that. I've had, not often, but 2 or 3 times, I was called out on how do you even know that the patient was there. But I'm also going to use it as a check and balance on my paperwork every day. Sorry. Right? So the patient comes in, they sign in, and the patient is entered both into a handwritten day sheet and then a computer day sheet, which I'm going to show you in a second. Right? And then I still use a paper travel card, and the travel card is exchanged kind of just like this. I think this is a clipboard, but imagine that it was a travel card. The CA is handing the patient the travel card. Right? And this is the back of my travel card. And so the person's symptoms would be lined up here. Neck pain, headaches, right sacroiliac joint pain, foot pain. And so on each visit, the patient is going to grade their symptoms on a 0 to 10. Right? Each symptom gets graded by the patient, again, in their own handwriting. Right? The doc is going to use the rest of the line for the services that he or she rendered, and then any of their notes, which can then get translated into software for the perfect bulletproof soap note each visit. So the patient, this is at the front desk, we hand the patient the travel card, and they're going to record their symptomatology, as well as we're going to confirm their next appointment. So again, taking a step back, I am a big believer in identifying on day 1 and day 2 what's best for the patient, pretty much on day 1, telling it to the patient on day 2. Typically, it's going to be something like 36 visits over 3, 4, or 5 months, whatever your doctor recommends. And so if that's what's best for the person, I want to tell them that. I want to then set them up so that they can pay to get the services, and then I want to schedule them for those visits. And so if it's 3 times a week for 12 weeks, they're scheduled Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2:30. Patient comes in, we acknowledge them by name, we hand them the travel card, they fill out their symptoms, we're confirming for Wednesday or Friday, and that part's done. This is my handwritten day sheet, and so I keep track of a lot of things on this. So if the patient is new, or a report of findings or a re-exam, which doc saw the patient's name, the services that we rendered, what the production was for that, what our expected pay was for that, and then any actual payments and write-offs, right? So there's a ton of information on this document. And so I know lots of offices that run without this document, and I still think that it's a mistake. And so this is the handwritten front desk day sheet. It gets filled in as the patients come in. And so the last piece is, and you can see here, we're still trying to do better on this, is to have multiple different email series set up. So one could be patient education. But, you know, if the person ended up talking about infertility, just as an example, if we had a follow-up infertility funnel with, you know, 5 or 6 emails and whatever else we wanted to include it, we could tag that person to start that series based on what happened with them during the day, right? So imagine that, you know, for every 100 visits that you see, you started 10 different email series on something pertinent to that individual person. And so you could control that by day sheet as well, right? I also want to enter everything into the computer. And so this goes into the software conversation, right? I want all of the charges, payments, write-offs, and the visit entered when the patient comes in. And so I don't like having open visits in the software and then closing them out again when the patient leaves. It's one of the challenges that I have when I review software. So you should be able, if you can't in your software, like, I think that it's an issue, right? And so I want to be able, when the patient comes in, first of all, the vast majority of visits, once the person is set up, or once a patient has a re-exam, from re-exam to re-exam at least, the visits in between basically should all be the same. And so in the vast majority of those visits, the charges are going to be the same as the prior visit. And so we're going to enter all the charges into the computer. We're going to finish the visit. The only time I use a fee slip is if it is irregular. So if I did something extra, or if the patient did something less that day, and so it wasn't the same as their last 6 visits, then I would use a fee slip that could go back to the front desk, and then we would need to fix the visit that was already closed out. But this only happens a handful of times out of 100 visits. And so the vast majority of you know, visit number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are all going to be the same. Also on the way in, so we've recognized them by name. They've signed in. We've recognized them by name. We've exchanged the travel card. We've confirmed the next appointment. They've filled in their symptomatology. We've put them in the handwritten day sheet. We put them on the computer day sheet, and we collect a payment. And so ideally, we have fewer and fewer people paying each visit, and that people are paying by schedule. Ideally, they prepay once, and like, we don't need to deal with this 20 times, but if they want to pay as they go, or if they're paying monthly, or if they're paying, you know, twice a month or every other week, whatever your schedule is, if it's a day that they owe us a payment, we're going to ask them for a payment. If there's any other paperwork or administration issues, if maybe, you know, there's some asking them to do a review or a testimonial or promoting like an internal event, if we're promoting that week, we're doing all of that on the way in, and then the patient is routed. So it's a question that I would ask all of you is, after we're done with them at the front desk, where does the patient stage? And so it could be in reception, it could be in jump seats, it could be in different rooms. And so if you could type into the chat where your patients stage, either waiting for the doc to see them or waiting for the services that they get before or after they see the doc, that would be helpful to me. Where do your patients stage? Looking for you, or even if you wanted to yell out. Roller bed or jump seats, wobble area, waiting room, right? All of those make good sense to me. And so again, I would review your procedure and make sure it's the way that you want. I used to use jump seats, right? So then the patient receives care. And so the patient should obviously receive care in the clinical way that's best for the patient. In a standard CBT type practice, the officially approved method would be EAT, exercise, adjust, traction. But not everybody practices CBP, and probably even in Dr. Deed's office, patients get adjusted first occasionally. But I would have the standard way that you want your visits to go, ideally, right? And so my recommendation is that the doctor is seen first. And so if they're doing some exercises first, they could do that. But then the doctor has his or her regular office visit. And depending, again, on your technique and on the patient and where they are in their care, right? This is a 3 to 5 minute turn, giving the patient exactly what they need, creating hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands satisfied patients. And what they're satisfied is about the adjustments out of your two hands that they got and the effects that had for them, right? And then anything that you do after the adjustment, PT, rehab, or rest, or anything else that you have the patient do, right? You finish your documentation, and so the patient is now done. Again, if it's an irregular visit, you could create a fee slip so the front desk knows that they need to change the visit and add or subtract something from the standard visit that the patient normally gets, right? It's called the travel card because it travels with the patient. We know that. So when the patient is done, we've taught them this. Basically, they just walk out and wave. So they don't stop at the front desk. For those of you over 50, they do not pass go. They do not collect $200, right? We acknowledge them. We wave, see you Wednesday, and out they go. In fact, some percentage of patients will linger and they'll want to hang out. And we want to discourage that right up to the doc having a frank conversation with the patient, depending on how heavy they're lingering. And so if you have any patients like that you should be talking to your doc about, I give you total permission to bring it up and talk to the doc, right? And so we want to be certainly polite, and more than polite, we want it to be like the best customer service experience anywhere that they get, certainly within healthcare. And we want to be able to do it as efficiently as possible. And the model, is this kind of 30-minute or less turnaround where the patient walks in, they're warmly welcomed, they're processed efficiently, they get a great adjustment, they do everything around the adjustment that they need to do, and they leave for next time, right? And so that's the cycle that we're trying to create over and over and over again. And so to integrate it into your practice, right, you can start like any other new procedure, which is to start teaching new patients on day 2. And so it's a step actually in my day 2 after the report of findings is the office orientation. And so this is where you teach people how to utilize the office. So Mary, when you come in from now on, we're going to ask you to sign in. Beth is going to give you this card. It's called your travel card. We have your symptoms on the back here. And what we'd like you to do is to grade it each visit so that we know how you're doing. Right? We'll confirm your next appointment. If you have a payment due, we ask you to make it on the way in. Any other paperwork we'll handle. And so on your way out, you don't need to stop. And so we actually teach patients to not stop on the way out. And so if you just did that with all the new patients without even dealing with all of your current patients, like in 90 days, it would be implemented. But the vast majority of the current patients, if you just teach them just like that, we started a new procedure. And so in order to service more people better, right, we're just going to handle everything on the way in. And so here's what we ask you to do. So on your way in, this, and this, so that on your way out, you can just leave. The vast majority of people will go into immediate compliance with that. And the 10 or 20% that need the extra care, they can still stop and we can give them the extra care, right? But if you keep focused on them, you can really dramatically cut it down. And so if we're going to see 200, the front desk in reality can see 220 instead of 400 or 500. And if you're going to see 300, right? So as you get bigger, even this becomes a more important issue to kind of keep track of. And so here's what I see is that there's no real understanding of what one-stop front desk should look like and why it's beneficial. And so the senior doc doesn't really either buy into it or adamantly doesn't buy into it. And then if not, then you're going to do a different procedure. And I would still encourage you to standardize whatever your regular office visit procedure is, both customer service administratively and then like how the clinical stuff gets added into it, right? But when the senior DC wants to do it and the staff understands what the policy is, the vast majority of patients comply, and it's a great relationship. They love it. It allows us to service more people easily, right? CA resistance is only like when they know that the doc's not going to follow through, and so it just creates more chaos. But seldom will I run into a CA that kind of like won't do it. And so if we get the senior doc to buy in fact, like oftentimes the CA sees the benefit of it and is critical in getting the senior doc to buy into it. And there's no patient resistance other than the 5 or 10% that's going to resist to any policy that you try. And again, if that person is otherwise reasonable, I would bend over backwards and, if they need to stop and be reassured on the way out, then I'll do it. But if they're not, if they're going to be, unreasonable about everything, it could fall outside of the will you work together with me as a team standard, and I might at that point discontinue the relationship with them, right? So first steps, some assignments for you, right, is to kind of audit where you are without changing anything right now. And so to count the next 100 visits. And so for some of you could be done by the end of tomorrow, and others might take a little longer. But you count the next 100 visits and you see how many people are really stopping at the front desk on the way out. And then there's an office-wide decision about is committing to a one-stop front desk and tightening that up if you're already see the logic of it. Reestablish that commitment and then look to see where we're falling, and then to make sure that more people are on maps, right? So even if they're weekly for the next 10 weeks or monthly for the rest of the year, that we have all of that in the computer, on the travel card, that patients are on a payment plan. And so instead of paying every visit, they've either prepaid or maybe they're paying monthly or maybe 2 or 3 payments. That the travel card is a tool that we actually use on every visit, as well as the day sheets, and that we institute this on each and every visit, and we get to a more efficient front desk. So that's my one-stop front desk presentation. Takeaways, again, by chat or audio on your thoughts on this, a breakthrough, a thought, a win. Who might want to go first? Dr. Dan? You were in and then you were out. There you are. The front of the And so you could have another opportunity on any visit as well, particularly on a re-exam report of findings. So people that are paying weekly or by the visit, you might want to move them into something other than paying on each visit. Dr. Jeannie, what say you? even if they're not scheduled going out, couldn't Mary schedule them for their next visit based on when they come in? Like if they're going to be... So if you taught them a little bit and then gave Mary the power to do it, I think that you could tighten that up. What's the report from the no power zone? Right, so on the call, we've had people snowed out, we've had no power, we've had a guy that was flooded with a hurricane, and so, having a emergency response is probably important. And then even like, is there stuff, if you're not physically harmed the place, is there what we can get done kind of deal today? Very good. Anyone else have a takeaway they'd like to share? Last chance. All right, very good. I appreciate all the time that you spend. This recording will be available shortly. Everybody have a great week and a great month, and I'll talk to you guys soon.